I didn't come here to be found, I came here to vanish. To the crooked, ivy-cloaked house at the end of a forgotten lane, where the wind sounded like whispering ghosts and the floors remembered every footstep. Where the lights flickered not from faulty wiring, but from something older, grief, maybe. Or memory. My name is Maya Hart. I'm 29, and I don't know how to cry properly anymore. I moved into my grandmother's house 3 weeks ago after her death and left everything else behind, my job, my friends, my city, and most importantly, my ability to pretend everything was fine. It wasn't fine. It hadn't been for a long time. This house was supposed to be temporary. A place to process, to breathe, to fall apart in peace. But something about it, its stillness, its aching corners, grabbed me by the ribs and refused to let go. And then he showed up, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first night I slept in the house, I didn't sleep at all. There were too many sounds. Not the loud kind, no cars or voices or city noise, but the unsettling kind. Groaning wood. Distant rustles. The kind of silence that's almost aggressive, like it's pressing against your eardrums. I lay curled in the unfamiliar bed, still in my jeans, clutching a flashlight. I didn't need to be 4 a.m. I gave up and went outside. The air was sharp and smelled like wet pine and earth. The porch light buzzed, casting a weak golden glow into the fog that pooled at the tree line. I hugged my sweater around me and stepped onto the creaking porch, listening. That's when I saw him. A shape in the dark, just beyond the fence line. Still. Watching. A dog, not small. Not cute. Massive. His silhouette was broad and unmoving, like a statue made of shadow. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them on me. I didn't call out, I didn't run either, I just stared, heart thudding. After a minute, he turned and disappeared into the trees. He came back the next night, and the next, always the same, silent, watchful, never approaching. I began leaving out scraps, half a sandwich, a bowl of water. In the morning, the food would be gone. The bowl, untouched. He never crossed the porch. By the fifth night, I started waiting for him. I'd sit on the steps wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea I never finished, eyes scanning the shadows. And always, he came. Something about his presence filled a space in the air I hadn't realized was empty. One morning, I stepped outside and found him sleeping in the garden. My breath caught. Up close, he looked even bigger, thick fur the color of damp bark, long legs curled beneath a heavy body, a face that was more wolf than dog. He had scars. One above his brow, one down his flank. His ribs weren't showing, but they whispered of hardship. He didn't wake when I stepped closer. I crouched down, heart pounding, and reached out, just to the air, not to touch him. Where did you come from? I whispered. He blinked, and that's when I saw them, his eyes. One amber. One cloudy and pale. He didn't growl. Didn't move. Just looked at me like he'd been waiting. I didn't name him. Not at first. He wasn't mine. He didn't belong to anyone, but I started talking to him. About the house. About my grandmother. About the way grief had stuck to my insides like wet ash. He didn't answer, of course. But he listened better than anyone I'd ever known. By the second week, he followed me around the property like a silent shadow. Never too close. Never inside, and always at night, he lay near the door. I'd peek through the curtain and see the rise and fall of his chest, steady and grounding. It became a ritual. One I didn't want to need, but did. Then came the night the power went out. A storm rolled in fast, all wind and rage and sideways rain. I lit candles, double-checked the locks, and pulled the old quilt over my knees. Thunder cracked the sky like a whip, and for a moment, I thought I heard a howl and not from the wind. From him I ran to the window and peered out. He was there, soaked, trembling, pressed against the doorframe. Without thinking, I opened it. Water blasted in. Leaves and cold and the sharp scent of rain. He didn't move, even as the door swung wide. I stepped back. Come in. He hesitated. Then, slowly, as if testing fate, he crossed the threshold for the first time. He didn't explore. He didn't sniff around or bark or make himself at home. He walked, one step at a time, down the hallway, past the coat rack, and into my bedroom. Then he curled up at the foot of the bed and exhaled like the world had finally let go of him. I stood in the doorway for what felt like hours. Something cracked in me, not loudly, Just a soft split. Like ice shifting underfoot. That night, I didn't just sleep. I rested, really rested, for the first time since the funeral. Since the hospital. Since the phone call that shattered my world, and when I woke, the storm was gone, but he was still there. The house felt different in the morning. Not warmer. Not safer. But less empty. He stretched, yawned, and padded to the door. I opened it, and he stepped outside without a sound. I thought that would be it. One night. A fluke, but he came back, and when I left the door open, he came in again. By the end of the third week, we had a routine. He'd follow me to the bedroom. Wait until I climbed in. Then he'd circle once, always just once, and settle beside me. Close enough to feel the heat of him. Far enough to give me space. He never made a sound. He never left until morning. And every time I woke in the middle of the night, from half-formed dreams or silent tears I couldn't explain, he was already watching me, still. Patient. There, I didn't know what he'd been through, I still don't, but whatever pain lived in his bones, it spoke to mine. And in that strange old house, where grief and wind haunted the corners, he became the only thing that stayed, even when I didn't ask him to, even when I thought I wanted to be alone, especially then. The house was never truly quiet again, not because of noise, he barely made any. But because once you've been seen by something that understands you without asking, silence starts to feel different. He didn't fill the house with barking or whines or tail-thumping joy. He filled it with presence. Weight. Warmth. Something real I could count on. And yet, he never stayed. During the day he disappeared each morning like mist burning off the fields. I'd open the door after waking, step barefoot into dew-covered grass, and find no trace of him. Sometimes I'd see prints in the mud. Sometimes not. It was as though he dissolved into the woods, back into whatever lonely shadow he'd come from. I stopped trying to figure it out, not because I didn't care, but because deep down, I knew he would be back, and he was. That next evening, I didn't wait for him on the porch like usual. I was restless. Unsettled. A dream had clung to my skin all day, a flash of my grandmother's hands folding towels, a memory of her humming in the kitchen. I hadn't thought of that song in years. The grief came in sideways, as it often did. Not a wave, not a stab. Just a slow, tight ache that wrapped around my chest and didn't let go. So I moved, cleaned, sorted through old drawers, opened boxes I hadn't dared touch. In the back of the hallway closet, behind a stack of neatly folded Afghans, I found it, a frayed collar. Leather, cracked with age. A tiny tag still attached, its engraving worn soft with time. I turned it over with shaking fingers. Toby. The name hit me like a held breath breaking free. The moment I whispered it, the floor creaked behind me. I turned. He was there. Inside, I hadn't heard the door open. Hadn't heard his steps. But he stood in the hallway, ears low, eyes, one gold, one cloudy, fixed on the collar in my hand. Toby, I said again, and for the first time since. He'd appeared, his tail moved, just once, a small wag, barely noticeable. I held out the collar. He didn't approach. But he didn't leave either. It wasn't his collar, I was sure of that. This one was smaller, worn by a different dog, long gone. Probably the one my grandmother used to speak about in half-formed stories before she forgot names. But somehow, the moment belonged to this Toby. Or maybe that's just the name he wanted me to remember. That night, he didn't wait for me to invite him. I moved through the darkened house, locking windows and blowing out candles. I heard a soft thump behind me. Turned. Saw him already curled on the rug at the end of my bed, eyes half-lidded, chest rising and falling in rhythm with my own. I didn't question it, I just climbed in and whispered, "Good night, Toby." He let out a low sigh, deep in his chest. And I slept. The days were quiet but no longer hollow. I began working on the garden, my grandmother's garden, overgrown and wild. Every time I knelt in the dirt, digging up weeds, I felt watched. Not in a creepy way. In a safe way. He never approached during daylight. Never touched the house. But if I looked up quickly enough, I'd spot him between the trees, sitting like a statue in the shadows, head tilted just slightly, ears flicking. A guardian, ghost, both. Sometimes I'd talk to him while I worked. He never responded. But I knew he heard every word. One afternoon, as I planted lavender near the front porch, I paused mid-sentence and asked out loud, "Why me, Toby?" Why are you still here? A bird startled from a nearby bush. When I turned toward the tree line, he was gone. Then came the scratching. It started 2 nights later. Soft at first. Barely there. Like claws dragging against wood. I thought I'd imagined it, but when I tiptoed down the hallway toward the source, flashlight in hand, my pulse already too fast, I found him sitting at my bedroom door. Not lying down. Not waiting to be let in, sitting. Staring. Scratching, just once. A single motion. Then stillness. Toby? I whispered. He didn't move. I opened the door wide. He walked in, past me, past the bed, and sat in the corner near the window, facing outward. What is it? I asked. Silence. But he didn't lie down. Didn't curl up like usual. Just kept facing the glass, watching. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept imagining movement outside. A branch tapping. A distant crunch of leaves. But every time I sat up, Toby was still. There, calm, alert. When morning came, he was gone again. A week passed, then another. Every night, he was at my door before I could close it. Every day, he was gone before I opened my eyes. I started waiting with the door ajar, so he wouldn't have to scratch. It felt wrong to make him ask. One night, I had a nightmare. It wasn't even a realistic one. Just fragments. Cold breath. On my neck. A heavy presence pinning me to the bed. Whispers in a voice I didn't recognize. I woke up gasping, and there he was right beside me. Not at the foot of the bed. Not in the corner, right beside me. His head rested near my hip. His body. Tense but grounded. His gaze locked on my face. And I swear, he knew, and not just that I'd been afraid, that he knew what I'd seen, and he stayed. Didn't move but didn't blink, not until my breathing slowed again. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? I stopped wondering where he went during the day. I stopped asking if he belonged to someone else, if I should put up flyers, or take him to a vet, or check for a chip. The truth was, Toby belonged to this. To me. To the space between grief and healing I had carved into these walls. The bond didn't need explanation. It needed only acknowledgement. One evening, I was reading in bed when I heard a different kind of sound outside. A sharp bark. It wasn't Toby's. I ran to the porch. Heart suddenly full of dread. 2 figures in the yard. Dogs. Stray, maybe. One growled low. The other barked again. Toby was standing between them and the house, his body still, rigid. Head high. His stance said one thing: this is mine. You don't. Come closer. The growling escalated. For a moment I thought he might charge, but he didn't. He didn't need to. Something about him, his weight, his certainty, was enough. After a tense pause, the other 2 backed away. One yelped. Then they were gone. Toby turned, looked at me, and padded up the porch steps like nothing had happened. He followed me to bed that night, and stayed. I should have been scared. Of him. Of his size. Of his mystery, but I wasn't, because every night he slept near me, the dreams stopped. Every morning I woke up and felt like I'd survived something. And maybe I had, maybe we both had. I didn't mean to let him in that night. I really didn't. The door was already closed. The wind had picked up. Rain slapped against the roof like impatient fingers tapping a table, and I'd settled into bed. With a book I wasn't really reading. The power had flickered twice. Thunder rolled low in the distance, like a warning clearing its throat. I had no intention of moving until I heard it, that sound, not a scratch this time. A whimper, low. Hoarse. Barely there. It froze me mid-page. My ears strained. Another crack of thunder masked everything. I held my breath. There it was again, whimper. Then a heavy thud. I dropped the book and crossed the hall barefoot, heart already racing, every instinct in my body pulling me forward, toward the sound, toward him. The porch door creaked open under my hand. Cold air rushed in, wet and heavy with pine and earth. And there he was, Toby, but not standing. Not watching, lying, splayed just outside the door, his head lifted slightly, one paw curled awkwardly beneath him. His fur was soaked, clinging to his broad frame. His sides rose and fell unevenly, like each breath cost him something. Oh God. Toby, I was on my knees before I realized I'd moved. My hands hovered, uncertain. Where do you touch a creature like him? Where can't you? I told you not to go out there, I whispered, as if he'd ever listened. What happened? His eyes blinked once, slow, deliberate. .1 gold. One pale, even now, there was no fear in them. Only pain. And something else, trust, that did it. That shattered whatever invisible rule had kept us apart. I opened the door wider. Come in. He didn't hesitate. He rose slowly, legs trembling, tail limp, and stepped across the threshold with more effort than I'd ever seen from him. Each paw left behind a wet print on the hardwood. I didn't care about the floor, or the towels I ruined drying him, or the blood, yes. Blood, staining the hallway rug. What I cared about was the way he finally let himself lean against me, not fully. Just the weight of his shoulder, barely brushing mine, but it was everything. The cut wasn't deep, thank God. A long scrape across his flank, likely from wire or a fallen branch. I cleaned it with trembling hands while he lay on the old woven rug near the heater, eyes half-lidded but never fully closed. Don't look at me like that, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. I told you not to be a hero. His tail thumped, once, against the floor. It was the first time he'd moved in response to my words, the first time I laughed in weeks. That night, he didn't sleep at the foot of the bed. He climbed up onto it carefully, awkwardly. Like he was testing a boundary we both knew had already vanished. I didn't stop him. I just lifted the blanket and shifted to the side. He curled up beside me, his back against my thigh, his breathing steady but heavy. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the faint dampness of his coat, the occasional twitch of a paw mid-dream. That I reached out, hesitant at first, rested my hand on his side, and for the first time in years, maybe since I was a child, I didn't feel alone in the dark. And the days that followed. I noticed things, small things, how he would wait until I locked the door before relaxing, how he would glance at the shadows under the trees before lying down in the garden, how he flinched, not visibly, but just barely, at the sound of raised voices on the radio, or loud clanging in the kitchen. Someone had failed him. I didn't need to know the story. The scars told enough, but he was still here. Still choosing me, still following me to bed each night. One morning, after a string of unusually warm days, I found myself standing in the hallway, hand on the doorknob, heart aching from a dream I couldn't remember. I hadn't realized I was crying until a tear hit the floor. Then, quiet footsteps. No bark. No whine. Just presence. I turned. Toby stood behind me, eyes soft, head low. I didn't say a word. I dropped to my knees, burying my face in the thick fur of his chest, and for the first time since the funeral, I sobbed. The ugly kind. The shaking kind. The kind that empties you out. He didn't move. He let me fall apart, and somehow, without speaking, he held me together. That night, I didn't wait for him. I left the door open and turned out the light. I lay in bed and listened at first to the crickets, then to his soft footsteps padding across the wood. He climbed onto the bed without hesitation. Lay down with his head on my pillow, facing me. I turned toward him. We just stared at each other in the dark. Two souls that had nothing left to prove. I reached out. He licked my wrist, soft, deliberate, and I whispered, stay. He didn't need convincing. In the morning, the sun lit up the room like gold. Toby was still there, not just physically, but with me fully. Something shifted in me then. I had come here to disappear. To shut the world out. To grieve, but this dog, this fierce, quiet shadow, had found the pieces I'd tried to bury and laid them at my feet without judgment, and I began to wonder, maybe I hadn't been hiding, maybe I'd been waiting. That afternoon, I found a letter tucked in one of my grandmother's recipe books. Faded ink. Curved handwriting. It wasn't addressed to me, but I read it anyway. She wrote about the dog who always came back. A stray she called a guardian. A creature who seemed to appear whenever she was most alone. He never asked for anything. She wrote. But he never let me be alone with my sorrow. At the bottom of the page, barely legible, was a single line. He never left. Not really. My hands shook. I looked out the window. Toby sat in the garden, facing the woods, and I knew she'd seen him too. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but the words slipped from my mouth as if someone else had whispered them. Through me, I think I need you more than you need me. Toby looked up from the patch of sunlight he was lying in, his ears twitching, one slightly crooked from an old tear. His gaze met mine as steady, unreadable. That was the thing about him. He never gave me answers. He gave me space to find them myself, and maybe that was even better. The air had changed, the bright spring mornings that warmed the windows had grown heavier. The wind no longer rustled, it moaned. Even the birdsong had gone sharp at the edges. Too quick, too high-pitched. Like they were trying to warn me, but warn me of what? The sense of unease had started 3 nights ago. Toby had paced that he never paced, that he'd always been calm, deliberate, grounded. But that night he'd circled the bed twice, then again. Stopped. Listened. Trotted to the door. Came back. Lay down. Got up again. Something outside had rattled him, and that rattled me. It wasn't just the pacing, it was the way he positioned himself, in front of me, not beside me. As if preparing to block something. Defend me from something I couldn't see. The next day, I saw tracks by the fence line, not paw prints, boot prints, heavy. Deep. Unfamiliar. I told myself it could have been anything, a delivery person, a hunter, a lost hiker. But deep down I knew, nobody came out this far. The lane was private. The gates locked. The neighbors were half a mile away. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? All I did was sit on the porch steps that evening, flashlight in hand, heart tapping like Morse code against my ribs. Toby didn't leave my side that night. I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floor felt louder. Every tree branch brushing the window sounded like fingernails. I lay curled under the blankets, staring into the dark, feeling the air shift, cooler, denser. Toby stood. He moved to the door and growled, not loud. Not snarling, just a low, rumbling sound like thunder buried underground. I froze. There was something outside. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body tight. He growled again, deeper this time. Protective. Unmistakable, and then, a knock. 3 sharp knocks, clean. Measured. Human to my heart nearly stopped. Who would knock in the middle of the night? In the woods? With no car sounds, no headlights, no warning, I didn't move. I barely breathed. Toby didn't lunge. Didn't bark. Just stood tall, tail stiff, eyes fixed on the door like a sentinel. Another knock, then silence, then footsteps retreating, not rushed. Not panicked, just leaving. Toby didn't relax until several minutes had passed. Only then did he return to the bed, his flank pressed closer to mine than ever before. He didn't sleep that night, neither did I. A morning brought no answers, and oh no. No sign. No tracks. The ground was too dry. It was almost worse that way. I wanted evidence. Something to prove it wasn't a dream, but Toby knew. He stayed closer than usual. When I went to the shed, he followed. When I took laundry to the line, he sat facing the trees, unmoving. A protector, a barrier, a warning. On the 3rd day, the storm returned, heavy rain. Sheets of it, drumming against the windows like 1,000 desperate fingers. Thunder cracked so violently it set off my car alarm. The house flickered with power outages until I gave up and lit candles. I was chopping vegetables by flashlight. When I heard it again, not footsteps, not a knock. A voice, a faint, barely audible, hello? Is someone there? A man's voice, polite. Controlled. Too calm for someone lost in a storm. I moved to the window, staying low, careful not to silhouette myself in the light. Through the curtain I saw only rain. No figure. No movement, but Toby was already standing, head high. Shoulders tense. A growl building in his chest like a gathering storm of his own. I pressed my hand against his back. Don't. Please. Don't go out there. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Then he turned, not away from the door, but toward me. He nudged me, once, hard, like he was saying, go. I hesitated, then obeyed. We backed down the hallway together, me barefoot, heart hammering, him silent, massive, ready. We slept in the hallway that night. Door locked. Lights off. My back against the wall. Toby curled protectively in front of me. He wouldn't leave, not even for a second. The next morning, the voice was gone. The woods were still, but that didn't bring peace, just questions. I searched the yard. The porch. The garden, nothing. Who had been out there? Why, and how did Toby know? Later that day, while folding blankets in the linen closet, I found it, tucked behind an old shoebox. A photograph, faded, worn at the corners. My grandmother, young, maybe in her 40s, standing beside a massive dog. Toby, there was no doubt, same scar. Same eyes, one cloudy, one gold, but the photo had to be from 20 years ago. Maybe more. That wasn't possible unless, no, I shook the thought away, but it came crawling back that night as I lay in bed, Toby curled beside me, the candlelight casting soft flickers across the ceiling. What if he wasn't just a dog? What if he was the dog, the one who'd protected my grandmother, and now, me? I whispered it then, not expecting a response. Not needing one. You knew her, didn't you? Toby lifted his head slowly, met my eyes, and wagged his tail just once, then laid his head across my ankle, and stayed. I stopped checking the locks after that, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I knew it didn't matter that as long as Toby stayed with me, I was safe from people, from grief, from myself, but even he couldn't stay forever, and somehow, deep down, I knew that too. It was the cold that woke me, not a chill on my skin, but absence. The missing warmth beside me. The missing breath. The empty half of the bed where Toby always lay, curled like a crescent moon around the pieces of me that still hadn't healed. I sat up fast, blanket tangled. Candle stub long burned out. The window open, just a crack, but enough to let in the morning mist and the smell of damp pine. Toby? Silenced. I pushed out of bed and padded into the hallway. The air felt stiller than usual. Heavy. Expectant. The front door was closed, but the lock had clicked out of place. My hand hovered over it. A strange prickle crept down my neck, then I heard it, the whine, faint, painful, almost a gasp. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the basement. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the flashlight, fingers trembling, and moved toward the narrow door under the stairs. It groaned as I opened it. The stairwell beyond was black, colder than the rest of the house, air thick with damp earth and memory. Toby? I whispered. Another whine, and something else, a movement, not footsteps, too soft for that. A dragging sound. Scrape. Breath. I descended slowly, one hand grazing the wall, light flickering against stone and shadows. Dust swirled like mist. At the bottom, I found him, Toby, lying near the far wall, his body half curled, head lifted weakly. His eyes met mine, one gold, one pale, and I felt the floor vanish beneath me. He was hurt. Again I ran to him, dropped to my knees. Blood. Not much, but fresh. A tear on his shoulder. Deeper this time. Angry that he didn't move away as I touched him. He pressed into me, and behind him, a figure, just a flash, gone. As soon as the flashlight shifted, I turned, heart exploding in my chest. Who's there? Silence. No answer, only Toby's shallow breath against my arm, and I understood then, he'd followed someone down here. Driven them off. Protected me, again, and this time, he'd paid for it. I didn't know how I carried him up the stairs. I just remember the weight, not just physical, but everything. He was solid. Real. Heavy with meaning. I laid him gently on the rug near the fire and wrapped him in an old quilt. His chest rose slowly. His eyes flicked to mine. He was tired, too tired. No, I said, tears rising hot and fast. You don't get to leave. Not like this. Not now. His tail moved, just once, the barest hint of a wagas, if to say, I'm not going yet. The vet came at dusk. Got a friend of a friend, long retired, who didn't ask questions when I called in a panic. He examined Toby silently, eyes narrowing as he touched the wound puncture. He murmured. Not a branch. Not an animal. His gaze met mine. You said there was someone outside a few nights ago? I nodded. He didn't ask for more, just stitched the wound, gave him something for the pain, and stroked Toby's head like he'd known him for years. He'll live, the man said softly. But he's old. You know that, right? I didn't answer, because yes. I did know, but knowing didn't make it easier. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay curled on the floor beside Toby, our bodies lined up edge to edge. The fire cracked softly. Rain fell again, steady now, like the sky was exhaling. I whispered stories of my childhood, of the last words my grandmother ever said to me, of the time I lost myself in the city, in work, in pretending to be okay, and how none of it made sense, until he showed up. I don't know how you found me, I said. He blinked, but I'm so glad you did. He didn't move much, just breathed, but he stayed, all night. In the morning, something shifted, not in him, in me. I woke with my hand still on his chest, the rhythm of his heartbeat a quiet anchor. His eyes opened, slow and soft. And I understood something, without words, without proof. He had stayed long enough, not just through the night, but through my unraveling, through the worst of it. He'd kept me alive in ways I didn't know I needed, and now maybe he didn't have to anymore. I opened the window wide, let the light in. The bird song. The breeze. Toby lifted his head slowly and looked at the door. I hesitated, then nodded, and together, we walked outside. We didn't go far, just to the edge of the woods. The place he'd first watched me from. The place where our story had begun. He sat beside me, body leaning against my leg, warm and strong. I rested my head on his. The wind rustled the trees, and for a moment, just a moment, it felt like everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. We walked back slowly, a step by step. One more night. He followed me to bed, and this time, I didn't cry, because I knew, whatever came next, he had already given me more than I ever thought I deserved, and he had stayed, all night, every night. Until I didn't need him to anymore. The end.